Hello and welcome back. Today we are doing everything I read October through December, and I have my tree here, I have my antlers on, and happy holidays to everyone. If you celebrate Christmas, whatever you celebrate, happy holidays. And I read a lot, so let's just go ahead and get into it. I read Things We Lost in the Fire by Mariana Enriquez, which this is a collection of short stories that are set in Argentina. And they're really like compelling stories, and they're all like horror type stories. And I gave that 4 stars. It's pretty easy to read, so I would suggest it probably for around October time when I read it. Then I read Act Your Age, Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert. And this is actually book 3, but I didn't realize it until I started reading it. And you'll see later I read 3, 2, and then 1. So I kind of read them out of order, but it doesn't really matter that they're in or out of order. So this Act Your Age, Eve Brown is about Eve, and she's always trying new things, and she's kind of a mess at most things until she starts to work with kind of like a control freak at an B&B. And it's set in England, all the books are, and it's a cute romance with interesting characters. It's pretty fun. Both of the characters, one of them already knows he has autism, and then the other one kind of suspects that she might be autistic. So that's kind of interesting to see that portrayed throughout the book. I gave that 4 stars as well. Then I read Haunted Indiana by James A. Willis. These are a bunch of stories. Like, I know that each state, I think, has one. So, you know, there's like Haunted Ohio, Haunted Illinois, there's a bunch of different ones. This one is just a bunch of stories from paranormal people, paranormal stories from around the city and in the state. And it's kind of funny because some of these I grew up hearing. Like, my family would tell us stories, especially there's one in this book about Step Cemetery, and I actually have family buried in Step Cemetery, like really old family. And so we grew up going to this cemetery, and we'd always hear like the scary stories. So it was kind of fun to see that in the book too. But nothing really that crazy about it, so I just gave it 3 stars. Also, Phoenix might be making an appearance. He was napping, but he just awoke from his slumber. Then I read People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. This is about Alex and Poppy, and they've been friends for years, and they're kind of like complete opposites, and they go on vacation each year until one year like something happens between them. We don't really know what that is, and then Poppy's like, well, I want to try and go on vacation with you again and see if we can become friends again. I enjoyed it at the time, but honestly, I really forgot about it until I was writing all of these books out. I couldn't remember the plot. I couldn't remember the main characters, but I liked it at the time, so I gave it 4 stars. Then I read The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. I know a lot of people are going to probably be talking about this book soon because it is going to be made into a Netflix movie. And this is about Josh and Lucy, and they work for the top 2 executives at their like company, and they're polar opposites. They kind of play games on each other, like just kind of like juvenile type games of just like who can mess up the most or whatever. And you know, something sparks between them. I wasn't a huge fan of the characters, but it was a really fast read. It was pretty cute, so I'd give it 3 stars. I do think that stuff happens between them very soon in the book, so I was like, oh, this is kind of progressing sooner than I thought it would. Then I read Yearbook by Seth Rogen. Everybody knows who Seth Rogen is, the comedian. This is just an essay collection about his life, so, you know, growing up, you know, how he got into comedy, of course, drugs. And I thought it was a fun read. There were like some personal stories, but like he didn't really go into like hugely personal details, which I respect actually, because I know celebrities are always bombarded with questions about their lives, and it was kind of cool that he didn't get all into it. But I kind of would have liked to read a little bit more about like him getting into pottery and stuff, because I know he's been doing that lately, which I think is really cool. But I think it was really good. I'm not like the biggest Seth Rogen fan, but I've seen a lot of his movies, so I enjoyed it and I would give it 4 stars. Then I read Attachments by Rainbow Rowell. This is set in 1999, right before Y2K, and basically it's between an IT guy and like he is set to like monitor people's emails, and then the girl who works at this place, she like knows her emails are being monitored, but she doesn't care. She still emails her friend all the time, which all of us know now. We always like send emails that we're probably not supposed to send on work time or whatever. Not me, but you know, other people do. And I thought it was a cute story because they're kind of like talking about each other, but they don't realize that they're talking about each other. So I gave that 4 stars. Then I read Forever Interrupted by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is about Ben and Eloise, and they fall in love really fast, and then tragedy strikes only a few days after eloping. And Susan, Ben's mom, comes to town and just can't believe that her son like would elope without her there. And the story ranges from like the past, like Ben and Eloise falling in love, and then like the present of just dealing with the aftermath of what happens. And the story just kept taking turns that like I guess I wasn't expecting. Like at one point it kind of seemed like, oh, maybe she's pregnant. Oh no, she's not pregnant. So it was just kind of like, where is this going? So I wasn't like super impressed by it, so I only gave it 3 stars. Then I read Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeymoon, and I actually had tried to listen to this audiobook maybe a few months ago, and I couldn't get into it. I never listened to an audiobook before, so I tried listening to this because I think I saw it was through Libby, and I was like, oh, let me try listening to an audiobook and see if I like it. And I don't know if it was the person doing the audiobook or if I just didn't have the attention for it, but I didn't care for it. But then I was like, well, let me try and give the book a chance and actually read it instead of just going off the audiobook. And I liked it. Long story short, let me say what this book is about. Eleanor struggles with social skills, and Raymond is like an IT guy who's kind of like unhygienic, and there's like another guy who like fell and they're like taking care of him. Eleanor is kind of like a weird character. She like struggles a lot, but she learns like friendships and different things like that. So it was pretty interesting overall. I'm glad I actually read it instead of just listening to the half hour that I listened to of the audiobook. So I gave that 4 stars. Then I read Anxious People by Friedrich Bachmann. This is about a would-be bank robber who accidentally holds 8 strangers hostage. I won't go into much else about it, just in case you want to read it. It's interesting, it's a fun story to follow, and a lot of past characters and like past situations like overlap, so it's really interesting to see how it all turns out at the end. I would give that 4 stars. Then I read The Music of Bees by Eileen Garvin. This is about Alice, who owns a bee farm and she works with local government. Jake is a teenager who recently got paralyzed, and then Harry is like an anxious ex-felon. So those are the 3 main characters, and they all work together to help save the community from a pesticide company who's going to come in and basically eliminate the population of bees and also hurt a bunch of other farmers in the area. It's a really cute story, mainly about friendship and loyalty, and basically starting over and how they each help each other. I think it was really sweet, and I would give it 4 stars. I think that was a really good one. Then I read Survive the Night by Riley Sager. This is about Charlie, and she needs a ride home because there's been a lot of crazy stuff going on early from college, and she meets this guy at like the campus board, and his name is Josh, and they start heading out to go home, and they start sharing stories on the road, kind of like avoiding the topic that why she's leaving early. And the reason why she's leaving early is there was a killer on campus who actually killed her roommate, so she's trying to just get away from everything and kind of start over. Well, as they're on the road, she starts getting weird feelings about this guy. She's like, what did you say your name was? Where did you say you were from? She starts questioning who he is, what his motives are. So it is pretty interesting overall. And there's a lot of different twists and things. I didn't like the ending. I didn't like the reveal. I didn't like what happened between the main characters at the end of the book. If you read this, I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but maybe we can talk about it in the comments. Let me know what you thought, because I didn't really care for what happened, so I gave it 3 stars. Then I read Take a Hint, Danny Brown by Talia Hibbert. This is number 2 of the Brown sisters. This is about a young PhD student, and she agrees to fake date her friend, Zafir, after a video of him rescuing her goes viral. It wasn't even a rescue. There was just a fire alarm went off, but it's a funny story, and it's actually really cute. And he's kind of like the grumpy guy, and she's like super optimistic, but she's like scared of relationships, and he's like overly like into romance. So it's really cute to see like the difference between them, and it kind of reminded me of like Ted Lasso with like Roy Kent and Keeley in there. Maybe that's just me, but that's what I thought of. So I would recommend it. That's 4 stars. Then I read 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. This is about Eva and Shane, and they're writers who grew up with each other, but they kind of went their own ways. Now they're back together, and they're kind of addressing that each of their main characters are based off of each other over the years that they haven't seen each other. And it's a really lovely story, but it is full of like trauma that they both went through. Like for Eva, she had a really traumatic history of growing up with her mom and her mom's boyfriends. And then Shane, I forget his backstory. That's probably not good, but I'm sorry. And this was a while ago when I read this, but I really enjoyed the story. I recommended it to a few people. I think everyone would like it, because it always is nice to see diverse characters as well. Both of the main characters are Black, so it's really cool to see like a Black romance novel. So I gave that 4 stars. Then I read The Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins. This is about Rachel, who takes the same train every day, and she watches like a couple out the window, and she kind of imagines what their life is, and then one day she sees something that's not quite right, so she kind of like gets involved in their situation. For me, I really struggled to read this book. I just, every single chapter after I was done, I was just kind of like, do I want to read the next chapter, or do I want to stop? And I was like, you know what? I kind of want to read this book because I want to see the movie. I haven't seen it yet. So I was like, let me just try and get through this book so I can get to where I can watch the movie. And it was pretty interesting, like how everything turned out, but I didn't really care for the main character that much. But beyond that, I thought it was alright, so I gave it 3 stars. Then I read Happily Ever After and Everything in Between, which is by Debbie Tung. This is like kind of like a comic strip graphic novel type situation, mainly about like married couple things. You know, I've been married for 3 years, so I can relate to a lot of the things in here, so it was pretty cute. I gave it 3 stars. And then I read Book Love by Debbie Tung, and this is also just about like book related things, like, you know, how, I mean, I don't really know how to describe it, but I thought it was cute overall, so I give it 3 stars. Then I read When the Stars Go Dark by Paula Mclean. This is about Anna, and she's a missing persons detective who, after like personal tragedy, she goes back home to kind of like reconnect with herself. And then when she's there, a local girl goes missing, and it kind of reminds her of an older case when she lived in the town of another girl who went missing. And Anna kind of obsesses over the story and gets involved in the situation. And this was really interesting. The twists were pretty good. Is about strong community, talks about pain and loss. Pretty great story overall. I gave that 4 stars. Then I read the last of the Brown sisters, Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. Chloe is chronically ill and wants to start checking goals off of a list, and Red is her guide who kind of works in her flat. So this is actually the first one, but I read it last. But I thought it was pretty fun and sweet and cute, of course. And you know, I'm trying to think out of the 3 which one was my favorite. I think this is tough to choose, but probably the Take a Hint Danny Brown was my favorite, but all of them are really good. I feel like they're all about the same level. And if I didn't say, I gave Get a Life Chloe Brown 4 stars. Then I read Second First Impressions by Sally Thorne. Ruthie works at the front desk at a retirement villa, and Teddy's father actually owns the retirement villa, and Teddy shows up and he has to earn his keep, and Ruthie doesn't want to deal with him, so she sticks him with these two older ladies who are always bothering people. And it's a very simple story and it's cute, but I mean, kind of looking back on it now, it wasn't my favorite, I guess, but I still gave it 4 stars at the time. But yeah. Then I read Convenience Store Woman by Sakaya Murata. Sorry if I mispronounced that. Kiko has never fit in, and at 18 she starts to work at a Smile Mart, just like a convenience store, and she finds really like a lot of peace and purpose in her work. But over the years, I think she's like 30 when the story is taking place, people start to question, like, why aren't you married? Why are you still working in this convenience store? Why don't you want more things for yourself? And she tries to push out of her comfort zone, and she doesn't care for it, but nevertheless, I thought it was pretty interesting overall. It was a little underwhelming because the story didn't feel like it, but I get what they were trying to do. But I gave it 3 stars. It was kind of an interesting read. Then I read The Last Flight by Julie Clark. Claire and Eva trade plane tickets, trying to escape their own past. Claire takes over Eva's life after Eva planes goes down, and this is a very suspenseful story and it really keeps you guessing. It's also very full of trauma, and each of the women kind of fighting for themselves. Well, you really don't know what happens with Eva at all, so I'm not going to spoil what happens, but you're really just start like, what's going on with her? But Claire, you follow mainly of her story and trying to figure out all of Eva's secrets, which are really interesting. I gave that 4 stars. Then I read Starcrossed by Minnie Dark. This is about Justine, and she knows Nick, her childhood crush, is a astrology junkie, so he always is like, what's my horoscope? I need to know what it is. We all know those people in your life, like my sister's really into astrology. You know, I'm kind of just like, okay, but she's all about it. She's like, what time were you born? I need to look it up. Anyway, getting lost. But Nick is like that. He really follows his horoscope to a T. So at Justine's job, she starts to tweak with the horoscope, trying to make Nick fall in love with her, because she's like, hey, he's single. I'm trying to get him to like me. Stuff starts to go wrong, and then it also is impacting other people's lives who also follow astrology that hard. It was a little goofy, but it was cute overall, so I would give it 3 stars. If you're really into astrology, you would probably love this book. I'm not that into it, so that's why I only gave it 3 stars. Then I read Just Last Night by Mahiri McFarlane. Sorry again. 4 friends who have been together since they were teenagers have to deal with a huge loss as 2 of them try to figure out if they really love each other. So this, I'm not going to go into the details at that much, but the relationships were really interesting to see, especially after like the huge loss that's experienced, and see how the characters deal with that. And I think the story was pretty well developed, and I gave that 4 stars. Then I read Man Eaters Volume 1 by Chelsea Kane. My sister actually gave me this. It's a graphic novel. When girls get their period in this graphic novel, they turn to flesh-eating wild cats. So like the government is trying to prevent girls from getting to their period so they don't kill people, but some of the girls are like down with the system, and I love that for them. It was really fun. I gave it 4 stars. Then I read Beach Read by Emily Henry. This is about January and Augustus, and they're 2 writers who challenge each other to write each other's genres, and they're like living next door to each other, and they're like enemies, but we all know they're not. And it was, like I said, we know they're not, so it felt like a little forced, but it was cute overall. I gave it 4 stars. Then I read Final Girls by Riley Sager. This is about Quincy, who survived a brutal attack on her friend. On her friends in a cabin, and now she's like a survivor. And there's also 2 other final girls, Lisa and Sam. Lisa survived a sorority attack, and Sam survived... I can't remember what Sam's was. I'm sorry. And, but Lisa shows up dead. So now Sam and Quincy are trying to figure out, like, if somebody's going to be after them too, or what's going on. Very suspenseful, very dramatic, very interesting. Kind of, you know, we always hear about the final girls of horror movies, so it's kind of cool to see final girls in the book world, so I gave it 4 stars. Then I read Soon the Light Will Be Perfect by Dave Patterson. This is a coming of age story for a 12-year-old altar boy with his mom who has cancer, his dad who's been recently laid off, and then his brother who's kind of like growing up, going into high school, doesn't really want to be with him around. This is pretty interesting because none of the characters have names except for one of them, and I can't remember her name, of course, now. But it kind of tackles topics of like poverty, illness, you know, growing up. I thought it was really like honest. I thought it was really beautiful, and I gave that 4 stars. Then I read To Sir with Love by Lauren Lane. This is about Gracie, who takes over her father's store when he passes away despite her desires to go to art school. And then the business is kind of in trouble, and there's this guy, Sebastian, who keeps trying to buy out the rest of their lease. And she wants nothing to do with it. She's trying to, you know, drum up new business, trying different ideas. Meanwhile, at the same time, she's kind of battling with her love life. She meets this guy online named Sir, who she talks to. It's like an anonymous dating app, and they go back and forth talking, and she's trying to figure out if they should meet in person. Basically, this is like You've Got Mail, the book version. Even the author like mentions it at the end, like she's a huge Nora Ephron fan, so you kind of know what's happening. It's very cute, very predictable. 4 stars overall for that one. You've Got Mail is still cuter. I'm sorry. I love that movie. Then I watched When No One Is Watching. I've been watching a lot of TV and movies lately, so that's why I'm in that mindset. I read When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole. This is about the gentrification of a Brooklyn neighborhood that turns sinister. So Sydney is developing a walking tour when she notices strange things happening. People are going missing, people are moving in and kind of like keeping an eye on the neighborhood. And then Theo moves in and helps Sydney uncover what's going on. This book was really crazy, but it was fun, and it was a lot about paranoia, can we trust her? Can we trust him? What's really happening? And it was very much Get Out in a sense too, especially towards the end, where it was because at the beginning it's kind of normal book, and then towards the end it's very fantasy, so it was really interesting. I gave it 4 stars. Then I read Normal People by Sally Rooney. This is about Connell and Marianne, and they have a very interesting relationship over the course of high school, college, and after. I watched the series before I read the book, so I wanted to kind of see how they matched up. And it's the adaptation of that is pretty good because they touch on all the same trauma, anxiety, depression, everything. But I still didn't really care for the book. I felt like it was a little slow, so I gave it 3 stars. Then I read The Newcomer by Mary Kate Andrews. This is about Letty. She finds her sister dead. It happens right at the beginning of the book, so I'm not spoiling anything. And her sister always told her, if anything happens to me, you take my daughter and you run. So that's what she does. And she finds her sister had cut out a motel from a magazine, and she was like, this is weird, my sister would never cut this out of anywhere. So she takes it and goes to this motel in Florida, and unbeknownst to her, her sister had some history there, and so she kind of gets involved with some people there, and the ex of her sister is trying to hunt her down because she knows that he did it. It's a lot going on in this book. there's a lot of characters too. So that was like my big thing about this book that I didn't like, because there were a lot of things that weren't necessary. This book was, I feel like, unnecessarily long. I think it was like 500 pages. I can't remember exactly, but it was really long. And the details, like there were like 3 whole pages about bingo. I was like, do we really need to be talking about bingo right now when there's like a murderer trying to get after you? I don't know. You know, maybe not for me, but I can see how some people might like it, but not for me. So I did give it 3 stars. Then I read The Grown Up by Gillian Flynn. Most of us know Gillian Flynn from a lot of her books, but this was a short story. And this is about a woman, and she works, she kind of has like a dual job. So her real job is like she gives hand jobs to people, but it's a front, so they don't get in trouble. So she's also a palm reader. So this lady comes in and was like, I need help because I think my house is haunted, and can you come to my house and take care of it because it's turning my stepson crazy. So she goes and some stuff happens. I'm not gonna spoil it or anything, but it's really interesting and I liked it. I gave it 4 stars. Then the last book I read is the second to last week of the year. I don't think I'm gonna be reading anything else. If I do, I'll add it in. But the last book of the year, pretty sure, is Booked for Christmas by Willie Merlin. I had to read a Christmas book. This is actually a short story, and this is about a writer, or actually, yeah, a writer and a book critic. And the writer is having a party, Christmas party at her cabin, and the book critic comes. It's Sophie and Evan, and to her party, and she's like, they have to kind of deal with each other. Well, then they get snowed in together. It's a Christmas romance. It's like a Hallmark movie. It was really cute. So I gave that 4 stars. And like I said, I only have 1 more week of the year left. I don't think I'm going to be reading anything just because I know I'll be busy. But if I do, I'll slip it in here. But that's everything I read October through December. And I reached 100 books this year, which was my goal. So I'm super excited that I met my goal. And I am probably just going to stick to 100 books next year. Because it was kind of hard to try and fit them all in this year. But we'll see. We never know what can happen. And if you've watched all these videos this year, thank you so much for watching. I know I said I was going to do another craft video and I did not pull through, but here's to hoping I do better next year. And you know, this is just for fun, so I appreciate anyone watching. I hope you have a great new year. I hope you have a great holiday season, and thank you guys so much. And one last little shot at Phoenix, just staring out the window here. And that will close us out. Thank you so much. Bye.